Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being with us here at the 36th Sustainable Agriculture Conference. My name is Mariana Spence. I'm CFSA's membership coordinator and the host of this workshop this morning. You've joined Organic Landscaping for Agritourism, Pleasure, and Profit, and we're really excited to welcome our speakers, Leonora Stefanile and Maggie Jensen, and I will let them further introduce themselves.
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our presentation. Agritourism is a great way to connect to the public with your farm, and we are excited to help you on your way to beautifying your venture. We have a lot of ground to cover, so we will be moving through the slides at a good clip. We're not going to answer questions during the hour we have to present, but we are going to be doing a breakout session directly after the talk is over at 11. So please be sure to join us to that. It'll be half an hour of just question and answer. And if you feel free to put your questions in the chat, and then we can bring that into the breakout session. And just be aware that that's a Zoom meeting, so you have to log into that separately. It doesn't automatically go there from here. So without further ado, here's a little bit more about us.
Good morning. I'm Maggie Jensen. I'm going to be giving the second half of the presentation on landscape design. I am a farm manager at the Two Graces restaurant in St. Pete, Florida. It's a farm-to-table restaurant. I am also an organic gardening consultant and designer for private clients, and I am a specialist at Sunken Gardens, a botanical garden in St. Pete.
And hi, my name is Leonora Stefanile, and I am the landscaping director at Barkwells Resort, which is a dog-centric vacation rental company near Asheville, North Carolina. We provide guests with a dog-friendly property that spans acres, and there's lots of gardens and a meadow and goats in there. Before I was doing landscaping, I was a research assistant to Dr. Janine Davis. For the horticulture department in NC State, we focused on specialty crops and organic growing systems. And before that, I was a farm intern on many organic farms in New Mexico, North Carolina, New Jersey, and Florida. And I also have a BA in art. That is how me and Maggie met. And we sort of were able to turn to landscaping because it helps us kind of combine our passions for growing and with design and art. So, why is landscaping important for your agritourism venture? So, whatever you do, you're going to have to market and advertise your agritourism venture. So, landscaping and beautifying the landscape and, really highlighting what you're doing is going to help with your marketing. When guests arrive, you want them to have a really positive first impression, lots of color. It's really, stunning to behold, and, they get excited. You want to create a sense of beauty, abundance, relaxation, fun. This is what, is going to stick in guests' mind and create that customer loyalty. Also, you can use landscaping, colorful flowers, displays, decorations, etc., to serve as landmarks. You want it to be very obvious where to park, where to enter the fun, where to pay, etc. Landscaping can also help with privacy, can hide more working parts of the farm. Sometimes the production areas aren't the prettiest, so you can work strategically with that in your landscaping. It also can add to the real estate value of your property business. Right now, one of the clients I work for, the business is for sale. So, the landscaping makes a big impact there. And also you can augment the farm ecosystem by providing, establishing native plants that provide forage for pollinators and wildlife habitat. So that's not to be overlooked. Practices. So remember that there is a large demographic in the tourism sector that value organic practices. This is a great way to educate people about what that means. Also, sustainability. You want to create something that's low cost and easy to maintain. So you don't want to plant things that are going to require a lot of spraying and fertilizing, etc. Again, increasing biodiversity. You want to have a thriving farm ecosystem. A lot of people want to do tourists want to seek out agritourism because they're looking for a connection with nature. So provide them with nature, increase the biodiversity as much as you can. Obviously, it's important for certified organic. Even if the agritourism area is not certified land, it may fall into that buffer zone. And a very important low spray methods means you don't worry about the re-entry intervals. They will not hesitate to grab whatever is in the garden and pop it in their mouth, no matter how many signs you put up. You have to put barbed wire around something if you keep a guest from eating it. So keep that in mind. Create a low labor perennial system is the goal. And I do spray, but only when there's a really blaring problem. And I only use OMRI listed products with re-entry interval and post-harvest interval in mind. Okay, so what do landscaping and farming have in common? For both, you create a plan, follow the plan, you reevaluate every year. So you're essentially making a business plan for your agritourism, and landscaping is a part of that. You're going to reevaluate it every year. It's a working document. What your original plan is, it may not be what it actually ends up being, but you do want to stay cohesive to that original goal. I definitely recommend consulting with a professional landscaper if this isn't your strong suit. They can give you a lot of ideas from how to set things up to working with a landscaping software to what plants to choose. And so, it's definitely worth the dollars there. Make sure you keep record of nuances and complexities, and it's very helpful to see what you did year to year. Increase scale slowly. Don't get over ambitious. We're all growers here, so we definitely have lots of ambitions, but just remember to, go slow. It's going to look better that way. All right, more things we have in common. Similar methods, equipment, supplies, you're growing plants, but for a different purpose. Sometimes you can use the plants that, that are in your production areas as landscaping. People are coming to your farm because they're curious about, where did my food come from? To see a pumpkin plant growing right when they walk in is going to be exciting them. A lot of people who are coming have never seen that before. The production areas are a part of your sort of grand landscaping design. Zoom out, think about that. You're going to have to hustle to make landscaping work. There's a lot of maintenance involved, and it's like, with farming, you're always having to go to a good clip. So it's the same with landscaping. And, the investment that you put into beautifying your property in time, money, labor, planning is, what you're going to reap at, you're going to reflect it in how it looks. Okay, so what are the differences? How to think like a landscaper and not like a farmer. So I come from a farming background. What are we as farmers focused on? Yields. We want efficiency with regard to yields. We want to make technological improvements to increase the yield. And the latest crisis is like when that technology fails. How do I fix this busted thing? There's definitely some of that with landscaping, but a little different. So what are landscapers focusing on? Guest experience, creating a mood. Again, what are you providing and what do you want guests to feel when they're experiencing your farm? You are always, hustling, trying to beat the clock, trying to clean up the landscaping before the guests get in there. So efficiency with regard to time. And if there's a landscaping crisis, very likely, if there's a big washout or something, just throw some mulch over it, just figure out how to hide it. Okay, logistics. Bed space. I would recommend starting small the first year with no more than 300 square feet of garden beds for the landscaping. If production farming going on the farm as well, or if you work another job, do not underestimate the amount of labor that your landscaping is going to take. Design. If you don't have any background, again, please consider hiring a pro to get you started. There are softwares that you can use. There are user-friendly, affordable options out there. Again, how much time do you have to dedicate to this? Do you have, someone who's willing to help you? You want to consider that before you get started. What equipment and tools do you already have on hand for the farm that could cross over, and what are you going to have to acquire in addition? Water access. You're going to want to water your landscaping beds at some point. So, making sure that you can get a hose there is going to be very helpful. Trust me, bringing in a golf cart is not the way you want to go. Obviously, making a budget is very important, and staying within that budget as much as possible. And then you just, take stock of your supplies. Where are you going to source plants, compost, fertilizer, mulch, irrigation, etc. Don't forget about the sort of non-planting based thing like fencing, containers, and decorations, because they can play a role and costs money and takes time to set up. So what specialty services may you have to do before you get started, like grading or doing some draining? What can you do yourself, and what can you farm out? So we highly, highly recommend farming out some of the labor time. For example, for me, I work every week at Wells 30 hours a week, and that's about 3/4 of an acre. So, it's a lot of thorough looking, doing something, standing back, going forward. It can really be helpful to hire someone with these landscaping skills who can really focus on making it look great. If you have like a young person who maybe just graduated college and they have a background with gardening and art and they have common sense, like that might be a good fit as, a part-time worker or something. At minimum, make sure you have someone as a backup who can, at least run around with a weed whacker and tidy things up. That someone else could be a farm intern, part-time worker, working spouse. Just make sure your flower beds are marked properly so that person doesn't know what you just spent a bunch of money. So run into that issue before. And just, your design, you may not have enough time when you're being honest with yourself to create lots of flower gardens. And so providing guests with just a nice lawn is perfectly fine. So just find something that fits the labor that you have to put into it. All right, so jumping into design, and Maggie's going to cover a lot of this later. So function, what is the purpose of the landscaping? What is your agritourism setting? Is the mood joyful and fun and exciting, such as that of a corn maze? Is it relaxing and romantic, like an Airbnb honeymoon suite? The theme should guide your design choices. What mood are you trying to set for your guests? You want to create something that's not a lot of maintenance while still addressing basic needs for good design, like color, creating shapes that are uniform within the landscaping beds. Again, you want to guide guest foot and car traffic, and you want to think about how you transition the guest area to the working farm area. And also, for staff housing, like you want privacy, and you want to, make everything look really pretty, which sometimes involves hiding certain areas of the farm. Okay, so in your process of creating your design, your first step is to zoom out and consider the entire farm property. Landscape design software can definitely help you play with this. I'm old school. I prefer graph paper. That works too. So your highest guest traffic areas is what you're really going to focus your labor on. You want guests in certain areas and out of other areas. How are you going to do that? Landscaping can help. Ease of car and foot traffic, for example, keep parking close to where people pay to enter. Please know that people on vacation get lost really easily. They will not read the signs. They are just kind of looking where to go. So make it very easy for them to find what they're looking for. So creating your design. So now you're going to zoom in a little bit to sort of the guest area. Again, use color and signs to guide them. You want to hit these things. Front signage, yeah, you want color and also with signs. So front signage, make it really obvious road. It should be clearly visible. Where to park. Signs are going to be important, but also just, sort of framing the parking lot with flowers is a good idea. Where to pay, where to use the restroom, and if there's, something like a corn maze or a U-pick, where's the fun begin and end? Something that you don't have to use color and flowers and plants to guide, but you definitely need signage. Where are the off-limit areas? Where does the production area start where guests are not welcome? Where to find help if they need it. People, if it's a sort of daytime activity like a U-pick, where can they access water, shade, first aid, staff help? These are all things that you don't want guests to be struggling to find. And obvious where to exit the farm. So here's some examples of how I've used color as a landmark. So with the picture on the left, that is entering Barkwells from the road. And you can see I've added a very colorful fall display. And on the right, that's our office. So again, that's where people access, how to pay for their vacation and our gift shop and a public restroom. So I've made it very bright and obvious, that's where to access those things. All right, so zooming into the plant beds, you want to think about, creating shapes and uniform lines. Symmetry works really well. If you're creating a circle, you don't want it to be a lopsided circle. You want to be as, precise as you can with your shapes and your lines. Within the bed, I really like to layer heights of plants. So tall trees and trellises in the back, or if you have a circular bed in the middle, and then shorter things kind of coming out toward the front where the guests are. Year-round color is definitely something to consider. So remember that I am based in Asheville, North Carolina in the mountains. So, I have a pretty significant real winter. So I need to diversify what's in every bed such that there's color there even in winter. During the warmer months, there's a lot more flowers. And during those high tourism times, brighter is better to guide the key guest areas in. Like that's where you put your yellows, your reds, your oranges, your whites. And sometimes I mix cool colors in because I think a variety of colors is really beautiful. And remember that green counts as a color, especially in winter and in shady areas. So here's, a quick example of with some beautiful plant heights. I've got, some marigolds and coleus in front. Those are annuals with some perennials going back. Here's some beautiful foxwoods. So, just a good example. And here's an example of some year-round color. So this is the front sign at Barkwells. This is what you see when you're approaching from the road. And in summer, I've got my coleus, I've got impatiens, begonias, and dusty miller. In fall, I've started to phase some of those things out, and I've added some pansies and some mums. But you can see here, I've still got those impatiens that hang on until it, a hard frost. And then by the time the hard frost comes, my pansies have grown in and fill the whole bed. So again, thinking about transitions and how color in the bed, really bright and obvious. And here's me in spring going to replant, my dusty millers and my begonias and my impatiens. So with this bed, I have it's an annual bed, annual heavy, and I have 2 key planting time, spring after the last frost has passed, and another in fall, which spans from, 4 weeks before the last frost until, the end of the season when I take all the impatiens off after they've frosted. Okay, so edible landscaping, the colorful vegetable garden. Oh, guests love looking at vegetable gardens. So keep it neat and pretty, stay on top of your IPM and weeding. You don't want things to be rotting out there, so you do want to harvest it, but you don't want to necessarily depend on this yield for commercial production. I would recommend it stay small. Strategic areas only, spend about an hour a week maintaining it. And look for varieties that are colorful and grow vertically, like purple pole beans, lemon cucumbers. Southern Exposure Seed Company has a great colorful vegetable garden seed mix. So, that's available. I recommend planting the vertical colorful vegetables in the middle of the bed and then surround that by a lower colorful border of things like rainbow Swiss chard. Okay, so how to establish a colorful pollinator garden from seed. I don't have a really big greenhouse, so I can't grow everything, all the starts I would like. So I do direct seeding with this. And the main thing is beating the weeds. So I don't like to use pre-emergent herbicides. I avoid it whenever I can. So what I do is when I lay out my composting bed, I let it get rained on and I weed all weed seeds, and I do that twice. Then I direct seed my pollinator flower seeds into the bed according to the seeding rate. And if the bed is in a central gust area and it's not too big, 2 to 3 rounds of weeding is usually a good idea. So you can see here on the left, watering or weeding post-planting, and it's pretty much a sea of green. There's some flowers, but they're not real obvious compared to the photo on the right, where I did do a lot of watering and and you can see, clearly there's individual plants and a lot more color. And this is where I made the mistake of overseeding the seeding mix. If you're worried about germination of your pollinator flowers, just make sure to thin it if necessary, because otherwise things can get leggy. Okay, so the next section covers individual plantscaping. These are not all the things that I use, and remember that this list is tailored for tins. I would recommend that when you get to this part, consult with a local landscaper for what they recommend, and also check with a nursery about what's in stock if you're not growing your own plants. I've included a mix of annuals and perennials, plants native to the US, in addition to some non-natives. Year-round color is important. I'll first show you what blooms well in full sun throughout the seasons. I recommend planting beds with plants that bloom at different times whenever possible for more color throughout the year and sense of aesthetic abundance. So this here is my late winter, early spring color. Got daffodils, which are native. Crocuses aren't, and pansies are an annual. But, pansies will survive all winter long. I plant them in fall, and they survive all the way until spring. Begonias get planted after all the frosts have passed. So, all right. So this is mid-April to early June. It blooms in mid to late spring. So tulips are a real workhorse during this time. Passion flower, marigold is an annual. Wonderful medicinal herb. Delphinium, gorgeous purple blue flowers, variety of shades. Okay, so moving on to early to midsummer. This is like early June to early August. Common milkweed, wonderful plant for pollinators as well as monarch butterfly caterpillar habitat. Dahlias are great because they just produce blooms starting in early summer. And then you'll have color in that bed all the way till frost. Turk's cap lily, gorgeous, adds a lot of aroma to your garden bed. And black-eyed Susans, simple but really cheap to establish, do well with direct seeding and, provide color for a pretty good time throughout the year. So blooms that in later summer and early farm, this is a tricky time. A lot of your spring and summer flowers are kind of pooped out by now. So these are my real workhorses for late summer. Zinnias are always a winner. They're great as cut flowers. They're great to line pathways. They do great direct seeding. I use a lot of zinnias in my designs. Calendula, wonderful medicinal herb. They'll even stick around after some light frosts. Echinacea, a great medicinal herb, perennial, native, great for pollinators. Comes in a variety of colors, something I don't have to think about because they just do their own thing every year. California poppies are full, really gorgeous feathery foliage with those bright flowers that keep producing. And blue vervain is really positive for insects and beneficials. And I love cool colors, and so it's like a really nice bright purple. Okay, moving on for part shade. Hostas, again, perennial, low maintenance, good choice for part shade or full shade. Same with ferns. There's a lot of cool native varieties out there. Just make sure the soil's nice and moist. Same for Solomon seal. There's ornamental varieties, and there's also medicinal varieties. Medicinal herbs is kind of a big thing right now. So including some of those in your landscaping can make it, really neat for guests to see. And then as a ground cover, I really like bugleweed or ajuga, as it's sometimes referenced. I like ajuga as a ground cover because it, establishes fairly well, but it doesn't become invasive like something like periwinkle. So I'm a fan. Full shade, this is going to be tricky. So let the tree species causing the shade and the soil quality what your plant choices are going to be. Transplant the moss in patches if you want to try a moss garden. I love working with moss. You want to push it down into the dirt and you keep it moist. For moss gardens, you do want soil to be mostly clay or loam based, and it's okay if it's fairly nutrient poor. It just has to stay moist. So if it's a moist area, then that could be a good option. Also, just, if you see that it is drying out, try to give it some supplemental automatic irrigation. That's what I did with this little stone terrace. Okay, landscaping dilemmas and some nifty solutions. So lots of problem solving in landscaping, just like farming. So for dry and shady spots where bare ground is visible, create a retaining wall to create a half-raised bed filled with compost. So that's what I did here. Here's one of my coworkers at Barkwell's. And basically we established this retaining wall on the downhill side, and then we filled compost into the inside of it on the uphill side because this soil was just very poor. I think it was fill dirt, and they had a hard time establishing grass before I got there. So I said, well, let's just not do grass right there. So poorly drained areas are also challenging. There's some plants that do well in these areas like asparagus, things in the mint family, horseradish, jewelweed. If you can't beat them, join them. You can create a pond there. Very exposed, sunny, dry, hot areas like near pavement, around the parking lot and such. Some plants that thrive there are California poppy, zinnia, blanket flower, cosmos, and also some succulents. So here's a before and after that I did. Again, this is that same area before we broke ground that was in the last slide. You can see, very patchy lawn, not very inviting. I recreated this retaining wall. So this is the finished retaining wall. And it's about 24 inches high. It's on the downhill side. And as you can see, we then, put compost in here and covered it with mulch. And then we planted these daylilies, which I just transplanted from another part of the property. Didn't have to spend any money on plants. And I also added this little flagstone pathway such that, and what it does is it essentially connects one gate with another gate, and it, erases the need for lawn there. So I then used just some sod to cover the back of the yard for just a quick uniform green cover. A heavy upfront compost application and regular watering is the key for good sod establishment. You also want as much light as possible. That grass is going to suffer if there's shade, especially sod. So another thing to think about sod is you have to water it a lot to get it to establish, and sometimes throughout the entire first season. So this was supplied with automatic watering for most of that season. Okay, some other dilemmas. Weeds growing up through paving stones. Oh, so annoying. I try to prevent this by laying silt fencing under my stone pathways, but if you don't do that, I use the weed whacker. There are some organic herbicides out there you can try, but just be mindful that a lot of them are kind of caustic. So you want to pay attention to entry interval on those, because if a kid touches it and gets burned, that's obviously really bad. Fencing failures where livestock gets loose. So here's some of the goats very eager to try to hop that fence and get at my landscaping. What I've done is I've just sort of erected a bed of daylilies right in front. So if they do get out, they just start eating the daylilies and they always grow back. So spots on the lawn that are bare, I have a lot of, dogs on the property that I service. So if, you have a pet urine related lawn issue, I treat the spot with baking soda and compost. And in the fall, I lime it because it's a pH issue that's causing that spot with the dog urine. Another thing I found, if you just want green fast, plant Dutch white clover instead of grass because it's a little more forgiving. Okay, so a little bit about establishing organic turf by direct seeding. Just to run you through the process throughout the year. In spring, organic pre-emergent herbicide 6 weeks later. You want to make sure you wait that that's when you're going to spread your fertilizer and compost, aerate if needed, plant grass seed, and water it in. For seeding rate and fertilizer applications, research what's best for the type of grass that you choose. There's a lot of information online about this. You can also make your lawn establishing time in fall. It's all going to depend on what kind of grass you're working with. Summer, you definitely need to water during dry spells, especially with sod, but also with seed, especially if you're planting during a really dry time. In fall, soil test if you think you need it. This can be helpful for when you're going to establish a lawn. If you've already established something but it's looking patchy, that's your time to reseed and spread more compost and lime if needed. Winter is the most sensitive time for grass, so just try to keep people and animals off it if you can. But if you can't, then you can fix it in spring. When to turn to sod. So mostly bare ground, and you need ground cover as soon as possible. So muddy areas are posing a problem for guests, and for some reason you can't mulch it. So for example, this picture on the left was very muddy, and I kind of covered it with mulch, but doesn't look that great, and the mulch doesn't actually solve the problem of the mud. And here was the other yard we were looking at earlier. Is very dry, overfill dirt. So I cut down the lawn size quite a bit, but when I did want to keep some of it in lawn for the dogs, so I just used some. It's nearly impossible to source chemical-free or organic sod. There are producers out there. You may have to drive a little while. So just keep in mind, it's an option, but it is expensive. And whenever I can, I use seed to create the lawn or fix problems. It does, lasts longer, and it is a much more sort of organic, and it's cheaper. So this bed took me 30 hours to complete, everything. It takes a long time. Don't underestimate how long it takes, but it looks great. Tools of the trade, weed whacker, leaf blower, I use a lot. Again, take stock of what you have and what you need. Definitely get a riding mower, or a tractor with a mowing blade, because you don't want that to take any longer than it has to. So at my job, I make compost for the goats eat my landscape clippings, and they create beautiful compost. In addition, I do some light organic fertilizer applications. I use about 16-16-16 twice a year. And soil tests can help determine your fertilizer schedule. You want to be careful about not putting too much fertilizer into your landscaping beds. Cover crops can help suck up some of that extra nutrition and create more organic matter. Look nice. So nurseries and plant source. Sometimes they sell certified organic. It can be difficult to find them. So I grow a lot of my own. Again, if you farm, this can be a good option. Sometimes I do purchase more conventional starts, but once they get to once they get to bark wells, they're treated organically. So do what's best for your system, but be wary of that if you have any kind of organic certification. Irrigation, I try to avoid having to use, but if I have to, I like these spray emitters. They're easy to set up and take down, more reusable year to year than drip tape. They store better. Just make sure they don't spray the guests. Rain barrels are also a good option, but just make sure they fit in with your aesthetic design. Plastic culture is a great way to keep weeds away without the use of herbicide. You can use this in your landscaping. A lot of organic farmers are turning to plastic culture. Just make sure you don't put carbonaceous mulch on top of plastic mulch, because it can be a mess to deal with later on, and it's not very good for the soil. Stonework can be cost efficient to do yourself until slopes, grading are involved, or really, really heavy rocks. This is a great supervised farm intern task. Put those young backs to work, paving stone walkways and patios and small retaining walls. Incorporate strategies to keep weeds away before you put the stone down. So you can see this photo on the right. I have laid some silt fencing down, and then the rocks are going to go on top of it. Here's Paco putting gravel over the silt fencing, and then the rocks over that. But don't hesitate to call a pro if you feel intimidated by some of these projects. Especially if you need, equipment that you don't have. These projects can really take a long time if you try and do it yourself with the wrong tools. Drainage issues, as you make your grand design, observe the drainage around the land and plan accordingly. I cannot stress this enough. You don't want to have to do once you've established a bunch of things. You want to do it before, but sometimes you just don't know. If you do want to do it yourself, I recommend that, this is something you have experience with if you're going to take it on. But don't use that corrugated tubing that comes from Home Depot. It just breaks, and it pretty much makes the drainage nil. In this project that we worked on, we used PVC with drilled holes. And again, if you're just not savvy with how this stuff works, hire a pro. We worked with a drainage engineer who, made this design and kind of led the project, and it was a lot more nuanced it's going to be. So, this is not always a quick fix. So here's some beautiful examples of agritourism on local farms throughout the Carolinas, and they focus on weddings and other special specialty event. I love the way that the giant solicitor on the left creates a forest impression for this couple. It's truly sets a mood of sanctuary. Imagine how they're feeling at this moment, ensconced in these giant flowers. They're saying their vow. You know, it's just really special. And this is the grand effect that you want to strive for with landscaping for special events. So if you have a farm to table component, like the folks at Sideways Farm and Brewery in Etowah, North Carolina, this is a great example where they've opened the public into, you know, a real agritourism area, which is the brewery, but also into their production areas where there's a pick your own flowers area. They use their own fruit, vegetables, and herbs in their craft beer. And, you know, so it's really cool. You know, as a visitor, you can just see everything, and they've done a great job of making it clean and tidy and abundant. All right, a U pick. So I really like this example of overall landscape design at Granddad's Apples in Henderson, North Carolina. You can see that everything's at this central location. There's this really great lot, nice and big. You know, don't skimp on parking if you're doing something like this. Here's the farm store where you can use the restroom and you can pay. Remember that guests are usually getting out of their cars into your farm after a really long car ride. So you want to make the restroom pretty accessible from the parking lot. And then, so that's in this building. And then the pumpkins are right there to beckon you towards them. You know, you're already falling in love with the farm right as you drive up. I think that's really good design. At Steps Hillcrest Orchard, I love the combination of flowering plants, pumpkins, hay bales, artwork, flags, and skips. Just remember that decorations factor into your landscape design, your budget, and your labor needs, but they do make a big impact. So, you know, remember that when you're making. And here's a corn maze. So Kersey Valley Maze Adventure in Archdale, North Carolina. You know, this is a theme park that has farming components, so it makes sense that it has a great big colorful focal point where to enter their corn maze. Sunlight Farms is a working farm that also has agritourism components, so it uses plants and pumpkins in a more classic looking side to guide you to the corn maze. Have your landscaping aesthetic echo the overall theme of your farm as much as possible, and I think both of these have done a really great job. So now I am going to hand it over to Maggie, and she's going to talk to you about design.
Hi. So now that Leonora has explained the practicalities of landscaping, I'm going to dive into the how-tos of how to create your design. This is an example from the Farm to Table restaurant where I'm the farm manager. This is the entrance garden. As you can see before, there were just some raised beds. These are 4x8 raised beds surrounded by mulch walkways. Not very inspiring. This first image is just as I'm laying out the potted plants to start a flower garden around it. And then the photo just to the right of that is only a few months later as the flowers are starting to grow in. The important thing about this image is this is the main entrance where guests are coming up to the restaurant from the parking lot, and this is the first thing they see. So it's important that they're kind of wowed right out of the gate with all of the color. It kind of makes the garden more self-explanatory. They understand that this is a well cared for piece of land where we're growing flowers and vegetables. Design objective. So your objective is to create a for guests when they arrive. It will be a demonstration garden where guests experience what your farm does and represents without having to walk out into the crops. The goal is to create stunning first impressions. You want oohs and ahs at every turn, like Leonora said. So this is kind of a miniature of your farm. You want to have a beautiful presentation, flowers, things to touch and smell, but you also want it to be a demonstration of what your larger farm does. So you're also going to be bringing in samples of the crops that you're growing out in the fields. This is a place for guests to get close to everything, to be able to walk past it, smell the flowers, taste the tomatoes, things like that. This is a great example. This is from a book called The No-Till Organic Vegetable Farm by Daniel Mays, and this is an overhead shot of their farm. I thought they had a great example of how to pull this off. As you can see, the road goes over the top of the image, and the parking area comes right in here, and they have a huge herb spiral here to beacon guests and let them know that they're in the right place. Cars come in, they park here. The farm buildings are all in this clustered area and the broader production area on that. But guests are invited through these pathways to come in here, explore the herbs and flowers. They have a U-pick area, a farm store, an on-site CSA pick. Everything is contained in this guest area. So it's perfect for them to experience what the farm has to offer without having to venture out, without getting in the way of production or putting themselves in danger near equipment. So how does this increase profit? It's by fostering partnership with your customer. It becomes a destination, provide guests with the vital connection to nature. They become personally invested in its continuation for the good of themselves and others. Satisfied guests become loyal partners who provide patronage, word-of-mouth marketing, volunteering, financial support when needed, and they will also shop in your farm store or purchase a CSA while they're wandering around your property. So I created this document. Grab a screenshot if you want to save it. I'm not going to go over every single element of art, but just so you can see the different things that you can be thinking about while you're creating your design. Views and vistas. So this is your chance to present the best side of your. You're going to be walking your guests around on the footpaths you're going to create. And as they walk, they're going to turn the corner and they're going to see a view of your farm, or it's going to open up to a vista of your production area or of your farm animals. The way you're going to design your footpaths is going to be based on these different views. So think about standing from a vantage in your garden, looking straight ahead. Everything in front of you is like a snapshot, something they could take a photo of. So you want to work with your design elements in each of those vantages and create something nice to look at from every angle. Pathways are the backbone of your design. This is your chance to take your guests on a tour. You're going to guide them to different views and have them look at exactly what you're trying to show them. Think of it as a conveyor belt that's going to guide your guests to different points of interest. This image on the left here is a good example of how to create curving lines to create more mystery and interest. As you can see, it's right in between the straight edge of the dining area and the straight edge of the garden beds. And it also gives guests a place to leave their table and go get closer to the garden and to be able to see what's growing out there without getting too close to where they're having to walk into the grass or into the mulch. And this image on the bottom right is a great example of how to lead guests away from the sitting area. As you can see, there's a little pathway over here, two little paths, and they kind of curve out of view into the garden. And these curving lines that disappear, that adds mystery. It makes people in the next corner. Sorry about that. So you can add focal points into your garden to kind of anchor the space, such as arches, benches, ponds, fountains. This is to create space and create vistas in your garden. Height and size. Leonora did go over this some, but here's just some more photo examples of keeping the taller plants in the back, working with the shapes, the varying forms of the plants. You want to have everything exposed to the sun, and you want to be able to see every plant from your line of vision. When you go to the nursery and buy your 3-inch pots, everything's going to be less than a foot tall. But you want to think about how those plants are going to fill out over time and what they're going to look like in their mature height, and make sure you have everything stacked up and with enough space to keep growing. Texture. It's really fun to work with texture if you want to keep it green and earth tones, or if you don't have time to do a lot of annual flowers, just working with varying shades of green, different shapes of leaves, can be really stunning if you have a good design. Color. This is where the annual flowers are the stars. If you can come up with a color palette and kind of have continuity of that across different views, that can be a really big impact. Say you want to do a whole garden of cool tones of blues and purples in the left. That can just be really stunning to walk through. Integrating flowers. So yes, I'm talking about designing a garden, a flower bed, a flowery landscape, but it's helpful for guests if the flowers go out into the garden in many different ways. You can have flower beds, you can have end caps with flowers on your veggie rows, and you can also just plant flowers right in with your vegetables. In the bottom center here, there's a great example of tomato crops. These are long rows of tomatoes, and underneath they have sweet alyssum growing all the way down the row. So I think this would be, just can smell this photo as I look at it, the tomatoes and the fragrant flowers. And that's a great way to just add sense of valuable beauty that your visitors are going to just eat up. And you can multitask by planting edible flowers. On the right, I have nasturtium on the top and borage on the bottom, and those are both interplanted with broccoli. And they just complement the color really nicely, but they also add another very high grossing crop, which is the edible flowers. So you can be getting some more production out of that too. For designs, I like this concept of having flowers in the foreground. The kind of organic, colorful, bushy design of all the flowers growing together in the flower garden really counterbalances the straight, neat and tidy rows of the vegetables. And if you can be looking through them from your footpath, like this first image, looking through these orange flowers, and behind it is the long straight rows. The second image shows the opposite perspective. We're out in the potato patch here, and you can imagine stepping out of this blue door, looking over the fence at all of these beautiful flowers, and then looking through the flowers and seeing the straight lines behind. And here's a great image, a little drawing design here, just to kind of see overall. You can see this direct path here from parking to this building. And as people are walking through, they're smelling the flowers, but beyond that, they're seeing the vegetables. So attracting wildlife. Wildlife is a sign that this is a healthy environment. Guests love the ambiance of seeing butterflies and bees flutter around as they walk. So it's very, very important that you're using all organic practices in your landscape. You don't want to invite butterflies that are then going to consume pesticides. You can provide waterers and feeders. You can provide landing posts and nesting boxes for birds. You can grow plants that provide food for butterflies and bees. And just as an extra tip, if you have any rodent pests growing catnip in your garden, we'll invite cats to help you with that problem. An edible landscape, colorful and impressive veggies to mix with ornamentals. So in your demonstration garden, it's important to bring in your featured crops. If you grow tons of lettuce, cauliflower, whatever your main crops are that you sell commercially, you want to have those available for guests to get up with. There's lots of beautiful vegetables that you can include. I think that cabbage can be really beautiful and stunning in a landscape. Here down in the center, rainbow chard and Vulcan chard can add a lot of color and texture. It can balance the flowers really well. You see there's some peachy flowers behind the chard that work together really nicely. There's always different colors of vegetables that are just interesting and fun for guests to look at. Like down in the right, we have pink stemmed celery. And just next to that is a 5-color pepper. So all of these peppers are on the same plant, and as they ripen, white to yellow to red to purple, a sparkly Christmas light display. And here's some more crowd pleasers that I like to include in a demonstration garden. Of course, everybody loves pumpkins in the bright orange. Big veggies like this daikon are always a crowd pleaser. Berries of every kind, blackberries, raspberries, strawberries, blueberries. If a visitor can reach out and pluck and eat a fresh berry, everyone's going to walk away happy. We have purple kohlrabi, different colors of lettuce, different colors of beans. If you're going to grow veggies in a demonstration garden, just grow. Container gardening. So this is a good option if you are not ready to break ground or if you're still working on your design. I suggest using very large containers, making sure you get the soil and the water drainage correct. And if you want to go really large, you have an option of these stock tanks. They can be as big as 8 feet long by 3 feet wide, as you see from the 5-year-old in the center picture. Okay, so how to keep it organic. There's 3 steps to an organic garden. 1 is mulch, 2nd step is mulch, and the 3rd step is also mulch. Other tips for keeping it organic are keep it chemical free. If you're going to use products, make sure that they're naturally derived, such as kelp, manures, things that are real organic materials. Use climate-specific plants and in the right season. Use all of the natural ingredients, water, sunshine, and compost. And then my pro tip is plants past their prime. Cull sick or bug-infested plants. Be very willing to sacrifice unhealthy plants for the good of the community. If it's not doing well, don't grow it. Don't try to hold on to sick plants by spraying them. Just let them go. This is my bibliography. I use lots of beautiful photo books. Take a screenshot of this if you want to see. I highly recommend the No-Till Organic Vegetable Farm and the other 5 as well. Okay, so that wraps up our presentation. We're going to click over to a Zoom where we can answer your questions, and we will see you there.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all. Hope to see you in the breakout session, and we really appreciate all this great information. We'll see you over there.